Welcome back. Saudi Arabia says 5 people have been sentenced to death in connection with the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The public prosecutor says 3 other people were sentenced to 24 years in jail. The prosecutor said a former high-profile Saudi royal advisor, Saud al-Qahtani, was investigated but not charged and was released. Khashoggi was a U.S. resident and Washington Post columnist. He was killed inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul after he entered the building on 2nd October 2018. The whereabouts of his dismembered body are still unknown. Pakistan says India's controversial citizenship law has sparked violent protests across the country. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the image of secular India has been buried under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's illegal and illogical law. Qureshi said the Hindu supremacist ideology is being imposed on India by the ruling party. He also said New Delhi can carry out any misstep on the line of control to divert attention from the protests. He said India has committed 3,000 ceasefire violations this year, killing over 300 people. The foreign minister said there seems to be a well-thought-out plan by India to destroy peace in the region. As part of a publicity blitz, India's ruling BJP has tried to bust myths around a controversial new citizenship law. The new animated video has faced severe backlash and protests as 25 demonstrators were killed across India. The video features 2 Muslim characters discussing the legislation before concluding India can only progress if there is peace and brotherhood. The video, released by Modi's BJP, has faced criticism and online ridicule. Spreading lies, the right-wing government also carried an advertisement across all national dailies promoting myths against facts. Through advertisements, the BJP tried to propagate that Muslims should not fear the new law. In another related development, a large number of Indian Americans protested against India's controversial citizenship law in the U.S. The demonstrators gathered outside the Indian embassy in Washington. Demonstrators said the purpose of protest is to raise voice for civil rights and religious freedom in India. They raised slogans against the government and held posters alleging India is headed in the direction of Hindutva ideology. The protest was organized by American Indian Muslims in association with over a dozen similar bodies. In another development, Amnesty International India has exposed the reality and horror of detention camps in the Indian state of Assam. In August, nearly 2 million people, mostly Muslims, were excluded from a list of citizens in the northeastern state. In a video, Amnesty shared the stories of Muslims who were detained without any charge and under mere suspicion. The activists and Amnesty officials shared details of inhumane living conditions in the detention camps. Meanwhile, protests continue against the new controversial citizenship law, with 25 people killed so far. Moving on to Afghanistan, where the U.S. military says an American service member has been killed in action in northeastern Kunduz province. Claiming responsibility, Taliban say the soldier was killed in an improvised explosive device blast in Shahar Dara district. Taliban said U.S. soldiers were targeted during their raid in Haji Safar Bai area of the district. They claimed another U.S. soldier was wounded in the explosion before rest fled the scene. The military has not immediately released any additional information. This death comes as the United States and Taliban try to reach an agreement for a U.S. troop withdrawal. In Syria, the death toll of Russian airstrikes in the northwestern de-escalation zone of Idlib has risen to 9. Opposition aircraft monitors said the warplane struck Maratul Numan city and a number of nearby villages. Russian planes also targeted the route Syrians take onwards the Turkish border to escape the bombings. Earlier, airstrikes killed 16 people and wounded 36 in Idlib. Over 1,300 civilians have been killed in the de-escalation zone despite the Ankara-Moscow deal. Meanwhile, 3 pro-regime fighters have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the attack hit Syrian regime and Iranian positions south of Damascus. Syrian state media said the missiles were launched from inside Israel to the suburb of Aqraba. It said it intercepted hostile missiles coming from the occupied territories. There was no immediate comment from Israel. Since the start of Syria's war, Israel has carried out hundreds of strikes on the country's territory against what it says are Iranian and Hezbollah targets. Turkey has vowed to increase military support to Libya's UN-backed government if necessary and evaluate all options. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's comments come a day after the parliament ratified a military cooperation deal between Ankara and Tripoli. This report has the details.
As violence escalates in Libya, the battle lines are hardening. The one country standing firmly behind Libya's UN-recognized government is Turkey. During a speech in Kocaeli, Erdogan made it clear that Ankara will not turn its back on Tripoli.
Recently, we have provided significant support to legitimate Libyan government. If necessary, we will increase the military aspect of our support to Libya and evaluate all our options from the ground, air and sea.
On the opposite side, the eastern-based Libyan National Army is not calling it quits just yet. A spokesman for Haftar's forces said it had monitored a Boeing 747 that had flown from Istanbul to Libya carrying military equipment. Ahmed Mismari warned other carriers against transporting weapons using civilian planes.
The Libyan National Army Forces gives a clear and honest warning to all aerospace companies. Our air forces will not hesitate to down or strike any civilian airplanes transporting military equipment to Libya's airports.
Meanwhile, Greece's Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias visited eastern part of Benghazi and met representatives of Khalifa Haftar's administration. However, Libyan Foreign Minister Mohammed Seala called on the US to take a clear stance regarding Haftar's offensive against Tripoli. Earlier, the US and Germany expressed concern about the growing involvement of mercenaries in Libya.
In Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe just before a trilateral summit between leaders from China, Japan and South Korea. China will host the trilateral summit on Tuesday amid heightened concern that North Korea may return to a confrontation with Washington. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang will be attending the trilateral summit in Chengdu along with Moon and Abe. Although various economic matters will also be on the agenda, North Korea appears likely to dominate the talks. More on talks and agreements. South Korean President Moon JaeIn says stalled denuclearization talks between the US and North Korea are not beneficial for Pyongyang. In a meeting with China's President Xi Jinping in Beijing, Moon said he hopes the two neighbors will cooperate more closely to help restart negotiations. President Xi said he would play a leading role in tandem with Moon to bring bilateral relations to a higher level. Moon stressed the need to prevent military tensions on the Korean peninsula from rising again. The South Korean president is visiting China for a trilateral meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. The meeting will be held tomorrow in China's southwestern city of Chengdu. Algeria's Army Chief General Ahmed Gaid Salah has passed away at the age of 79. State media said he died after suffering a heart attack. Salah was seen as Algeria's de facto strongman since the country's longtime president Abdel Aziz Bouteflika was ousted in April. He played a key role pushing through the 12 December presidential elections in the face of stiff opposition on the streets. President Abdelmajid Tebboune names General Said Shengria as acting chief of staff of the armed forces. In Honduras, 18 prisoners have been killed during a fight between armed gangs of inmates in El Porvenir prison. Officials say firearms, knives and machetes were used in the clashes. The violence followed overnight unrest earlier at a facility in the northern port town of Tella that killed 18 inmates. Honduras has recently seen a spike in prison killings. Last week, President Juan Orlando Hernandez ordered the army and police to take full control of the country's 27 prisons. The military has indicated that it will deploy troops in 18 penal centers identified as high risk. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. In India, 9 people have been killed after a fire broke out at a warehouse in New Delhi. Police said 10 others have been injured in the blaze in Kerari area of the capital. It said all dead in the fire are from the same family. Officials said the fire broke out around midnight and the building had no fire equipment. They said the cause of the fire is not known yet, but it is suspected to be a gas cylinder blast. In the Philippines, 11 people have been killed and more than 300 hospitalized after drinking toxic coconut wine. Health officials say the poisoning in Laguna and Quezon provinces occurred as people drank lambanog. It is a popular drink consumed widely during holidays and celebrations. Unregulated production and sales of lambanog are common in the country. In Indonesia, 3 university students have been found dead in a cave after being trapped by floodwater. Rescue officials said 8 students were trapped in the West Java cave and 5 of them have been rescued. The students, part of a university nature club, went there to train in basic caving. Rescue officials said students were trapped inside the cave for days before the team managed to evacuate them. A nature club member said weather was normal when the students entered the cave, but a sudden heavy downpour hit the area. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he will not make cuts to the nation's coal industry. Morrison has come under heavy criticism for his response to climate change and the ongoing bushfire crisis. He said he will not adjust his policies through panic. Morrison said his government will not engage in job-destroying and economy-crunching targets which are being sought. Canberra has backed coal-fired power for its economic value, despite the recommendations of a major report on climate change.
What I know is that the need to take action on climate change hasn't changed, and you don't run government on sentiment, you run government on the facts, and you run government on what you need to do to protect our environment and its sustainability for the future, to protect our economy and the jobs and the livelihoods that Australians depend on.
In Thailand, elephants are tamed and sold to tourism sites, increasingly advertised as wildlife sanctuaries to travelers. During training, elephants are separated from their mothers, brutally jabbed with metal hooks and deprived of food. Animal welfare advocates argue for animal rights, calling the taming technique cruel and outdated. More on these elephants in this report.
Chloe is only 2 years old, but she's a fast learner. The exercises seem innocent enough, but she's already undergone separation from her mother, beatings and months in captivity, all with one aim in mind, so that she is obedient. It's a tourist draw, and with visitors sometimes 5,000 a day, paying an entrance fee of $50, it's big business. Some camps are rebranding themselves as refuges or sanctuaries, but activists say the same old bad practices still occur. One NGO is looking to a new approach. Here, tourists must stay at least 15 meters away from the animals, and there is strictly no touching.
Our target is to return total freedom to the elephants, but we need to do this without causing problems to other communities living nearby.
Mahouts remain a key factor here, but the hook is only used as a last resort.
Elephants are safer, and also the tourists feel safer. Sometimes they feel stressed out when they see tourists, and as a result they can hurt the tourists. Ever since this program was implemented, they have become calmer.
There are nearly 4,000 elephants in captivity in Thailand, and campaigners hope that one day the bullhook and cruelty will be things of the past.
Stock markets across Europe are trading fractionally lower amid lack of stimulus. Investors locked in some of the recent gains in thin trading ahead of Christmas and Boxing Day holidays later in the week. In initial trade, London's benchmark FTSE 100 index dipped about 0.2%. The Pan-European Stock 600 index was down by a fraction. The The Paris CAC 40 slipped marginally, while Frankfurt's DAX 30 remained flat compared with Friday's closing level. In Asia, mainland Chinese stocks fell as the Shanghai Composite slipped by 0.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is flat. Japan's Nikkei 225 is trading flat, and South Korea's Kospi has marginally declined. Meanwhile, oil prices have slipped as Brent crude is down to nearly $66 per barrel. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.